This conference will now be recorded.
Fine. This is we are going to discuss for today. But what it is we'll see the prepayment. What is the prepayment, as well as we'll see the multi-period accounting and recurring invoices as well. So what are those concepts we'll discuss, and we'll try to see in the application. Okay. First of all, what is a prepayment? Okay. Prepayment is generally an advance to the advance given by the supplier. Advance given to the supplier, I'm sorry. Okay, we are giving an advance to the supplier before sending the material, before sending the shipment, right? So once the advance is made to the supplier, that amount you have to record in your application, right? So how do you make, see, in Oracle, without invoice you can't pay. Okay, so an advance, which is a payment to the advance payment to the supplier, right? So without invoice you can't pay in Argel. So for to facilitate that, there is an transaction type called prepayment. Okay, the prepayment invoice has to be created in Oracle applications, and that once you make payment against that prepayment. Okay, so once you make the payment to the you have given an advance to the supplier, that has been recorded now, right? So how do you adjust that one? See, once you given advance to the supplier, obviously the next step would be the adjusting that advance with the next invoice, whatever the supplier sends, right? So that invoice will be adjusted against to that the standard invoice, whatever the supplier is going to send once the goods or materials are shipped by him to the concerned person. Correct. So let us say you have an advance made to the supplier, uh, prepayment invoice. Let us say you have made an advance to the supplier for $5,000, and for goods and services that you requested. For the customer said you need to pay me an advance so that I can ship the goods. Otherwise, I will not do. So in that case, what you do, you don't have an option, right? You have to make the advance payment to the supplier. So that you will be recording by way of paying a prepayment invoice. Okay, once that is done, the supplier will be, once the prepayment, once you made advance to the supplier will send the goods, right? Again it goes into the purchase order, procure to pay process, right from beginning, from the purchase order to invoicing, right? Once the PO is done, then the material will be sent. That material will be received in our inventory organizations. Once the receiving is done, the supplier will be sent the invoice, and that invoice will be recorded in our application, right? So once the order is fulfilled, once the goods are shipped, then the supplier will send the commercial invoice, right? That standard invoice for the amount, whatever you will be procuring, whatever the worth of material you will be procuring, right? Let us say the invoice, standard invoice may be whatever, 5,000 or 4,000, 6,000, whatever, right? So as a business process, what you do, you have an prepayment, you have an advance to the supplier, which is prepayment, and later you have a standard invoice from the supplier for which you need to pay. Okay, so how does this transaction gets recorded in Oracle? Initially, we'll be recording this 5,000 as a prepayment invoice, and the whatever this commercial invoice that you get later will be recorded as a standard invoice, and this two invoices will be adjusted later, so that the advance which you made will get adjusted against the standard invoice, saying that the whatever the payment I had made previously is going to be adjusted with that, so that again there should not be any payment process. Okay, so we'll see that how it is going to happen now. Okay, to do that, there are certain steps. Again, for prepayment, there are certain configurations we need to make it. Okay, just setup and maintenance, payables, common invoice for payables and procurement. make sure that the prepayment account is being set up. Okay, this is the prepayment account combination which we had set up. Just go and check if that the prepayment account is set up or not. Okay, that is one configuration you need to cross check. As well as go to the invoice options, navigate to the prepayment area. Okay, check what are the prepayment terms are assigned. Generally the prepayments, once the supplier requested for an advance, generally you will be making the payment immediately, right? That is why generally we assign the immediate payment terms for the prepayments. Okay, but you can override it at any point of time. Okay, the next one is the settlement days. What does the settlement days means is, I said while discussing on the prepayment, I said two terms. One is the prepayment, which is an advance record, and the second step is the applying that prepayment to the standard invoice. Right. This settlement days talks about that number of days. Okay. Let us say I have created a prepayment today, and at what time, after how many days the prepayment can be applied against a standard invoice. That is where this number of settlement days talks about. Okay, if I give a 0, then whatever the prepayment I create today, that is available for apply for against a standard invoice immediately today itself. Okay, if I make it as 2 days to number 2, then if I create a prepayment with settlement days as 2, the prepayment is going to be available to apply against standard invoice after 2 days. Okay, which means it is kind of it is kind of an it is kind of an due date on the, maybe it is kind of an parameter that is going to be assigned on the prepayment, saying that this prepayment cannot be applied until this date is going to be met. Okay, so just take it as 0 because I want to apply it right away. And use distributions from purchase order. This is where we are creating an prepayment from the purchase order details. We are not going to do that. And show available prepayments during the invoice entry. Enable this one because when you are creating a prepay, when you are creating an invoice, application should pop you up saying that this supplier has some supplier advances, supplier some prepayment invoices exist, so that the user will come to know that there is an advance with this supplier that can be applied against to any standard invoice. Okay, it is kind of a notification it gives you on the invoice page if you enable this option. Okay, just save and close. Okay, now we are done with the required configurations for prepayment invoice. Okay, so just go into this work area, invoice workbench, create invoice. Right. So just the process remains same. Just create the prepayment invoice, fill up the invoice details, header details. Right. Prepayment 00 for 5,000 USD we are supposed to raise, and the invoice type should be the prepayment. From the list of values, just select the prepayment invoice. Okay, the payment terms already got updated as immediate from the invoice option that we set up. Okay, just go into the lines. Can you see the distribution is automatically populated? This distribution is defaulted from the common options that we set up. Whatever the prepayment account that you set up at the manage invoice common options against prepayment, that is going to be defaulted over here. Okay, so just once I have given the line amount, and I'm just clicking on save. Right, so if you can see, the status is updated as never validated. The what are the premium, the interview question, there may be a question, what is the prepayment process and what are the status, that may be the your interview question. Okay, when once you create the invoice, prepayment invoice, the status will be never validated. Just click on validate. Once validated, the invoice is got validated and the status is updated. If you can see, it is unpaid, which means the prepayment is invoice is not yet paid. The payment hasn't been run on this prepayment. Okay, so you can create the accounting, or it is not an issue, right? You can still without accounting also you can make the payment. So, and I'm going to make the payment of this prepayment invoice. Okay, one more thing is, prepayment invoice, you cannot make the prepayment invoice in partial payments. Okay, until unless it is completely paid, whatever the invoice. See, I have made this invoice amount as 5,000, and I cannot make the payment of lesser than that, because with that amount the invoice will not be available for payment. Okay, I will check for payment process profile. This is the payment document. I'm I'm making the full payment from the invoice workbench itself. Okay, so can you see, the payment, the status is now is updated to available, which means the prepayment, let me run the accounting as well, let it run. The prepayment has its prepayment invoice type has its own statuses. And once the once when you created the prepayment, the status was unvalidated. Once it is validated, it was unpaid. Once it is paid, it is updated back to available, which means this prepayment invoice is available for adjusting with any standard invoice. That is what is the meaning of this prepayment. So far, whatever the status we have seen, unvalidated, unpaid, available, right? Okay, the actions you are aware. Where once you created, it is unvalidated. Once you have validated, it is unpaid. Once you make the payment, the status is available, right? Fine. This invoice status are now the prepayment invoice is created and made. It is paid. So how does you, let us say from this same supplier, you have made the advance and that advance is being recorded in Oracle. Okay. Now after making the payment to the supplier had sent the goods. Along with the goods, he has sent the invoice as well. Okay, so for that invoice, let us assume the $5,000 invoice, standard invoice, is being sent by the supplier. Okay, so let us say we are creating a standard invoice now. Okay, just update the invoice amount over here, line amount, and give the distribution. Copy the distribution from over here. Right, I have given the line amount and distribution and simply saving it. This is not validated, but once I click on this save, can you observe that there is a bell icon which is being populated on the screen? If you put your cursor on the bell icon, it shows available prepayments. One prepayment is available against this supplier with an amount of 5,000 US dollars. That is what it says. Okay, this is kind of an notification or alert to the user saying that this supplier is already having a prepayment which can be adjusted against any standard invoice. That is what it's the meaning of this icon. Which, how come this is enabled? Because on the invoice, manage invoice option, we have enabled the button called show available prepayments. Okay, just validate it.
Let's say one question here.
Yes, please.
Yeah, the invoice, suppose it is in different amount.
Mhm.
We pay payment only 5,000. The amount is if it is in more than or less than 5,000, then we need to create any debit memo or credit memo.
Nothing required. Nothing required. Let me finish this and I'll explain. Okay. So how do you apply a prepayment? This invoice is validated and invoice is available. The standard invoice is now available, right? So, so, so how do you adjust? The standard invoice is available. The standard invoice is created now, and this invoice has to be paid, right? Instead of making the another payment to the same supplier, right? Whatever the advance you have recorded, that advance can be adjusted with this standard invoice, right? What is this advance is being recorded as a prepayment, so that prepayment invoice has to be adjusted with this standard invoice, right? So how we are going to do that? Just go to the invoice actions, apply unapply prepayments. Okay, so it is showing as the prepayment 100 is available, right? So just put the cursor on this tab. If assume that if there are multiple prepayments available for this supplier, all the prepayments will be listed over here. And what is the available amount? Let us say you have consumed, let us say this what is available amount is the amount which is available on the prepayment. Let us say I have a prepayment 5,000. I had made an 5,000 advance to the supplier, that is being recorded as prepayment, but this prepayment was applied to one more invoice prior to this. Maybe 3,000 has been consumed. So in that case, the available amount will be shown as 2,000, right? That I should be able to update, I should be able to apply only to the extent which I have made an advance to the supplier, right? So how much I can apply? See, by default, how come the 5,000 is being shown? Because the invoice amount is 5,000. Okay, if I want to make the 4,000, I can go and make it as an 4,000. That I can do that. Application gives you an option, but it's up to you what amount you want to apply. Okay, right now I'm going to apply 5,000. Okay, give the amount and just click on apply. Okay, so this prepayment is being applied for this invoice, and just click on done. Okay, just click on done, right? So save it. The invoice, if you can see the invoice status went against to needs revalidation. Why? Because we have done some adjustment activities on the invoice, so that the revaluation process again it needs to be run, so that the validations will happen for this invoice. Okay, just click on the validate, right? So this invoice is now being adjusted already, right? So you can see the status, payment status is updated to 5,000 is being made, because we have adjusted the prepayment against this invoice, right? Let us go and run the accounting and see what is the accounting that is being generated. See, can you see there are two events: invoice validated and invoice validated event, as well as the payment applied event. So what is the invoice validated debit and credit leg? This is the expense account data debit to liability account, which is the invoice accounting entry which we created in the first go, right? Once the payment is applied, right? Payment is, how come the payment is applied? By way of prepayment, right? So once the payment is applied, the liability got debited and the prepaid expenses got credited, because whatever the amount that is being adjusted against this invoice is has come from the prepayment expense, right? Which was debited in the prepaid expenses, prepaid expense invoice type. Okay, instead of the only funda is simple. If you have assumed that if you have make the payment, this accounting, whatever the line 2 and 3 you are seeing on the screen is going to be generated, accounting is going to be generated on the payment document, and the credit leg is going to become as an cash clearing account in case of payment, right? But this cash clearing account, everything, the actual payment has been made on the prepaid expenses, and the balance, whatever the you have advance you have made to the supplier is laid in the prepaid expenses, so that the instead of cash clearing account, cash bank or cash clearing account, the prepaid expenses has come into picture by crediting this balance. Okay, this is how the prepayment account works. Okay, so the questions around this on this topic is, what is prepayment, right? What is a prepayment invoice, what are the statuses of prepayment invoice, and what is the accounting entry that gets generated in prepayment. Okay, so these are the statuses. You are well aware of the prepayment, right? You are well aware of the prepayment concept, what is prepayment, right? So what is the prepayment accounting entry? You can go and view here, right? For the prepayment invoice, what is the prepayment invoice that gets generated is, you can, I'll just copy onto the Excel for your understanding. So this is the accounting entry when you adjusted the prepayment, right? So prepayment, this is the expense account debit to prepayment account credit. This is how the accounting entry that gets generated at the time of applying, right? So what is the accounting entry that got generated at the time of prepayment? We'll go and see. Okay. Right, the status, before that, if you can see, the status also updated, it was available prior to this, prior to applying this in adjusting this invoice. Now it is updated back to fully paid, which means the prepayment is fully consumed. There is no balance left over on this invoice, on this prepayment invoice, to be able to, so that you cannot do any future applications. Okay, assume that if you have partially applied, my prepayment is 5,000 and I have consumed only 4,000, I have applied only 4,000, then the still the status will show as available. Okay, just go into the accounting, right? What is the prepayment expense that is being shown? Prepayment account debit. This is at the prepayment invoice, right? Right. So you can see, so when you are making the payment, when you are making the payment on the prepayment, this is what the process we have followed, right? We have created a prepayment, and against the prepayment we made the payment, and once the prepayment is paid, we have created a standard invoice, and that standard invoice is being adjusted with the prepayment, right? So what is the we haven't run the prepayment accounting entry prepayment payment, but it would be the this accounting entry, right? This was generated from the cash clearing, right? So you can do that. You can go and check in the payment document entry. This cash clearing account is going to be picked from your bank accounting setup. Okay, so if you can see, initially when you created the prepayment account debited and liability account credited. When you are making the payment on the prepayment, the liability account debited and the cash clearing and cash account credited, right? So now this liability got knocked off, right? The balance, whatever the balance we have paid, 5,000 paid, laid in the prepayment account, right? When you are creating a standard invoice, right? When you are, again here one more entry comes, right? When you are creating a standard invoice, 5103 is your, okay, when you are creating a standard invoice, let us say this is my what is the expense account I had booked into this expense account, right? This is my standard invoice, and this is my, against the standard invoice, this is my credit leg, right? The liability account that got booked, right? So this is the entire prepayment accounting entry that generated out of the Oracle system, whatever the business process. Okay, so initially we have recorded it the prepayment account, and the prepayment account is made payment, and then you will be creating a standard invoice, and the standard invoice get adjusted against this prepayment account. Okay, this is the accounting entry that you should remember, right, as a process, so that you will be questioned in the interview, you can answer that one. Okay, that is one thing. And there were question around on the prepayment, what is the amount of, can I adjust lesser amounts? Yes, prepayment, see, let us say in the same example we have the prepayment invoice of 5,000, and the prepayment invoice, the standard invoice is let us say the standard invoice is only 4,000. Still you can go and do that. While applying the standard invoice, you can go and update that invoice. So once you clicking on the apply, the amount automatically gets defaulted to the invoice amount itself. You can 4,000 gets updated, or you can change it to whatever the amount, but the thumb rule is you can apply prepayment to the extent of only the available amount on the prepayment. Okay, I have a prepayment of 5,000, but can I apply that prepayment for the 6,000 amount? Yes, for the against to invoice, for a 6,000 invoice amount you can apply, but the $1,000 you have to pay again. Okay, so the invoice, the let us say you for your practice, you can, what you can do is you go and create a prepayment for 5,000, and one for one purpose, for one testing purpose, you create a standard invoice for 4,000 and make it as apply. That works. And for the second iteration, what you do is you create a prepayment for 5,000, and secondly create the standard invoice for 6,000 and see what is the impact. Okay, is it clear?
If it is 4,000, then what about the remaining 1,000? For that, we need to raise any
No, no, no.
entry
Why do
or
you raise a credit memo or something? See, you have given 5,000 to the supplier in advance. You have given 5,000 advance to the supplier, but you have procured only 4,000 worth of material, right? So for the
yeah.
4,000 worth of material, you will be adjusting only 4,000. The whatever the prepayment amount, it is still the prepayment amount. It shows as an advance with the supplier. So 1,000 still advance with the supplier. This 1,000 can be adjusted with any future invoice. Okay, assume that you are not going to transact with any with that supplier with any more in future, and you have to get back that $1,000 as an process. There is a process called
Uh,
refund. Okay,
Yeah,
for
but
that
it's
refund
the
upon
accounting period ends. Suppose the accounting month it is ends. In that case, we need to adjust same month or next month also. It
no,
is
no,
fine
you
as
don't
far
need
as.
you don't need to do or adjust this amount, whatever the amount prepayment account you will be booking, this prepayment account, right? This natural account, whatever it is taking, this prepayment account is an advanced type of account which is going to be which books into your balance sheet account. Okay, it is kind of an advance to the suppliers is where do you represent in the balance sheet? Asset, right?
Yeah, prepayment, current assets.
Yes, current asset. So it will reflect on your balance sheets. You don't need to close even at the year end process also. It is not, it doesn't require because it is an advance, you know, which made to the supplier, and that's you are going to, you know, that you are going to adjust that prepayment with the standard invoice that you get from the supplier. Assume that you are not going to do any transact any business with that customer supplier, and that 1,000 you have to get back. In that case, that we call as refund process. We'll see in the next session for that. Okay,
Okay,
the
then.
other
Yeah.
other process I discussed, right? At that time, I'll discuss on that process.
Okay.
Right. So the prepayment concept is done, guys. This is one of the important area. Definitely, you will be asked on this question. And recurring invoices, uh, s- recurring invoices, multi-period accounting. So let me first finish up this recurring invoice. What is recurring invoice? Recurring invoice is basically, so which are repetitive in nature. So let us say your rental income, rent expenses that you are going to pay to the landlord is going to be made on recurring basis, as every month you are going to make the payment to the landlord. But that invoice, maybe you will be getting the invoice from the rent receipt from the vendor, or may not, right? But at the on the beginning of the month you have to pay this rent, right? So to facilitate that process, user is need not required to be create the invoice each month manually. Okay, this recurring way of creating process is automated, can be automated in Oracle. Okay, so what is the process is, the once you, there are prerequisite processes, there are certain prerequisite steps you need to follow, you need to create, and once that is done, the whatever the period you mention, for all those periods the invoices will be automatically created in the application. Okay, so recurring, you know, the you understood the concept, right? Recurring invoices is basically for the invoices which gets created for the recurring concept, the recurring event. Maybe rent is the one of the best example. Okay, so for that purpose, user is not required to create the invoice each month, but the invoices will be created automatically based on the certain criteria that you set up, and based on that the invoices will be automatically created in the application for the periods you specify. Okay, let for that recurring invoice you need to create a calendar, because I need to for example, if you take the rent as an example, I need to make the rent payment for the 1 year, right? I am paying a rent of 10,000, right? 10,000 each month, and this rent has to be paid for the 12 periods, 12 months, right? 12 months, uh, the same amount. Okay, so this process can be automated. You don't need to go and create the invoice each month when you are actually making the payment. You can automate this process. One time you can automate this process so that the invoices will be created, and the invoice validation and payment process will be automatically taken care. Okay, so how do you do that? For this, there are two conditions. The amount is fixed, 10,000 we are paying, and for the period we are saying it to the system that 12 periods I need these invoices. So how do you specify this instruction to the system? By way of creating a calendar. Okay, What does this calendar talks about is the how many events I need an invoice to be created in my application. That is what you are going to specify in the Oracle applications. Okay, so to do that we need to set up the calendar, right? Let us go into the setup and maintenance, financials. The task is the manage payables calendar, because we are creating the recurring invoice inside of payables, and there is an task which is Oracle has already placed in the task inside of payables module is the payables calendar. Search for the managed payables calendar. Managed payables calendar is the calendar, right? These are all the created calendars. So just click on create, right? So Apple rent calendar. So type, it should be your general purpose. The payables calendar can be of two types. One is the payment terms. The whatever the other purpose you use, general purpose. Payment term, for payment terms. If you say while discussing the payment terms, we had discussed, right? There are certain date, certain process you need to follow. In that case, the payment terms calendar has to be defined. But for the rest of all the purpose, you need to use the type as a general purpose. Okay, what is the frequency? I want to i want to pay this invoice monthly, right? I'm paying rent on monthly basis, so monthly I have taken. And what is the start date, right? I can take from any date. So just to see the invoices, I'm creating taking start date as Jan 1st. Okay, just click on generate periods. So the calendar is being generated, right? 7 close, exit from here, go to payables invoice workbench, task
You
panel.
can create more than 12 periods.
It's up to you. That's what is the trigger point. If you create more than 12, whatever the number you create, those many invoices will be created.
Okay.
Create recurring invoice, click on create recurring invoice, right? Just open it. Open the FBD. It is an, again it is an uh, the ADFDA template we have created, right? We have by using the ADFDA application integration desktop. What we did, we have created the journals as well. By using the spreadsheet, we have created the invoices as well, right? This is a spreadsheet. Just click on edit. It will ask you to connect to the system. So it will ask you to punch in the login details, right? Apple, and give your password. Just click on skip. There is a new version which is available, ADFDA. So it is asking whether you want to install. Skip that one, right? So this spreadsheet is connected to your application. Okay. So select your business unit for which you want to create the recurring invoices, right? Uh, right. Just give the invoice number. So invoice number we discussed 10,000, right? Give the supplier. So just double click on this supplier column. A pop-up, since this application is this spreadsheet is connected to the application, it fetch the all the details from the application itself. You cannot update whatever the fields which are shown in the bracket, right? Those fields you cannot update whatever the fields you want. I mean, it is not a free text. It is connected to the system, and those values you can you can fill up in the Excel.
You can able to modify that amount, Tirupati, if any
Yes,
case requires.
yes, you can. Just is I mean, what is the what do you mean updating this amount?
Yeah, now we are creating recurring invoice. Suppose after 2 months or 3 months, the amount will get changed at that
So
time.
invoice will be created. You can go and update on the invoice. You will see that.
Okay.
So in the calendar field, just assign the calendar that we just created. Okay. Here there is a from sorry. Too far. Here there are from my two periods, which means whatever the period you specify for these periods, the invoice is going to be created, because though we have created a calendar, right? So what periods, how many periods you want to create the invoice? Let us say I have my calendar is Jan to December. If I give two period as December, then 12 invoices will be created. If I give till June, 6 invoices will be created. This is basically to give the number to the system, saying that what is the from and to criteria that for which the invoices has to be created. And then see if there are no purchase order information, because we are not we are creating the invoice without purchase order, right? So you don't need to punch in that information. And somewhere it should ask, yes, this distribution combination, you need to give which account you want to hit, the what is the account, right? So what account it has to be, go and sit, right? The rent account, we are creating an invoice, we are creating an invoice or invoices, multiple invoices, but what distribution it should have, right? This is the distribution I have given. So whenever the invoice is created, the invoices will be created with this distribution as the on the invoices. Okay. Okay, we have filled the data, and just once the data is being filled, just click on generate on the top button. Okay. So it asks you the options. On failure, continue to upload the subsequent rows, download all rows after successful upload. So I'll make, if something is something errored, I want the rest of the records to be loaded. Row inserted successfully, which means the row is being inserted into interface tables. The number of recurring invoices created 12. Why? Because we have given the from Jan to December to, we have given two data as December. That is why it is created 12 invoices. If you have given somewhere in middle of the month, for those periods the invoices would have been created over there. Okay, just go to the recent option. Can you see these are the invoices? Apple rent 1, Apple rent 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is the suffix is being appended, right? This is the invoice which is created. All these 12 invoices automatically created by the spreadsheet. So these invoices not validated. So invoices will be created as unvalidated status. Okay, just go into the invoice, right? So you can validate it. Someone asked, can I update these amounts? So let us say you are in somewhere in March and you want to update this amount. So my landlord asked me to pay 11,000, right? You can go and do that, right?
Before validation, we need to change, right, Tirupati?
Yes, yes. Even after validation also you can see. I think it goes into the revalidation process.
Okay.
So the distribution amount also got updated to 11,000. You can validate it. Validate it. Now also you can change. After validation also you can change the amount. Right? It is allowing, right?
Yes.
Distribution, the distribution you have to go and do it manually. It got updated. Now because you have done the updation on the amount, so again it is asking to revalidate. I've revalidated. Done. I can make the payment. This is how the payment. This is how the payment works. This is how the recurring invoice works. Okay. So again, there was one more concept. I'll take 5 minutes of your time. We'll wind up for today. The rest of the multi-period accounting will take in the next session. Split the installments on hold. If you remember, after creating the invoice on the installments, if anyone of you remember, on the manage installments tab, we have seen the option called split installments, and there is an option to call and place on hold as well. Let us discuss this, what is this, and we'll wind up for today. Okay, split installments, the same recurring invoice, whatever the invoice I have, I'm taking that as, and once you create the recurring invoice, is again it's a standard invoice, right? So you can play it is, and once the process is done, it is the again normal standard invoice. It is also created as a standard invoice type only, if you can see. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to split the installment, and I want to I will place one of the installment on hold, and I'll try to make the payment. How the application behaves, we'll see that. Okay. Suppose split installments. Once you click on this one, what happens? The application will split that amount into equal parts. Okay, with the same due date, with the same, it is kind of an duplicate record will be created with the by splitting this amount equally. Okay, you can change this amount. You can change this amount whatever you wish, but the thumb rule is the installments, sum of installments should be equal to your invoice amount. Okay, so what I did is I have application has given an option to split the installments, and there is an option also to place the installment on hold. Okay,
If
so
we split again, it will come one more row or two rows,
one
or
more row
only
it
two
should.
rows.
Let's see
Okay.
that. Let's do that. Let's do that.
Okay.
See,
One. Hmm.
you got right. Okay, let me do what I did is, out of these three installments, I'm putting one of the installment on hold, which means what does this hold on the installment, which means this installment will not be selected for payment, even though when you make payment on this invoice, whatever the invoice we have on the right on the screen, the installment of whatever is being put on hold, this will not be selected for payment. Assume if once I put the second installment on this invoice on hold, when and I try to make the payment of this invoice. Okay, this invoice, on this invoice I can make the payment of max of 9,000 only, because the 3,000 equivalent of amount is being put on hold. Okay, let us say you have an invoice from the vendor, and this vendor you want to, there may be conditions. I'm just taking a raw example. A 10,000 invoice, against which the supplier has to make some full has to fulfill some my contractual obligations, so that I don't want to pay a complete amount. I want to pay only 8,000 and 2,000. I want to put it on hold until the agreements are agreement the obligations are fulfilled, and after that only I'll be make the payment. In that case, what you can do, simple, you come here and you can split the installment into 2,000 and 8,000. Put the 2,000 row on hold, and the 8,000 can be paid. Okay, once the obligations are fulfilled, then you come back to this distributions, sorry, you come back to this installments, you can release that hold. Okay, so let us try to see this payment on this invoice, right? Right, let me go back to the payments and submit a PPR. Right, we have created a template, right? Apple check request is the batch I have given, submit it, manage payment process request, just keep on refresh. Six invoices got selected for payment, right? The invoice, see, can you see from the Apple rent invoice, there were two installments. Actually, this invoice was for 12,000, out of which we have splitted that invoice into three installments, 6,000, 3,000, and 3,000. One of the 3,000 installment we had put on hold, and when we are trying to make the payment, that invoice is being populated only with 9,000 as the payment. Why? Because that 3,000, whatever the 3,000 installment on this invoice, we had put it on hold, right? So that is why it is written refrain from the selection from this process. Okay, you can make this payment. There is no problem on that one. Okay, you can make this payment, right? So only 9,000 is going to be made from this payment batch, and for that invoice also it is going to be paid only 9,000. The 3,000 will be on hold until you release that hold, right? Until you release that hold, that 3,000 will be kept on hold. Once you release, then that installment will be available for payment. Okay, so this is how you make the payment. This rest of the process remains same, right?
Yeah, Tirupati,
So yes, go ahead.
yeah, can we pay this invoice from the invoice workbench? I mean, pay in full.
We'll see that. You can try that one,
Okay,
because I think it is painful. It should
takes the total
accept, but
amount.
generally, generally we will be in real time implementation. Majority of the customers, we will be majority of the customers, the payments will happen from the payments work area. So rarely that painful option will be used. It is not the case that the customers will never use, but the painful will be rarely used.
Okay, and one more thing is, and internet expenses also is example for recurring invoice.
You can, yes, you can take that. Internet, telephone, whatever,
I mean,
commission, right?
recurring invoice is nothing but is a payment which will be paying frequently.
Repetitive in nature,
I
simple word.
mean, sorry, repeat.
Correct. I'm sorry, I clicked on repeat. right? The payment has been happened, and I'm just going into the invoice work area, right? Let me go into the recent invoice. I guess where that invoice, this is the invoice, Apple rent, the March related invoice we have uh, paid. Can you see before coming this year? Can you see the status is being updated to partially paid, right? The because invoice is for 12,000, but we have paid only 9,000. That is why the status is applied to partially paid. If it is completely paid, status would be updated to fully paid. Okay, so once the obligations are fulfilled, if you wish to release this installment from hold, just click on release hold. Okay, this invoice will be now this installment on this invoice will be now available for making the payment. Okay, so any questions?
Yeah, and Tirupati and electricity bill also and electricity bill is also considered as a recurring invoice, but the amount is vary from month to month. Can we
that
consider
that
that
you can
bill as?
discuss in GL. That example we will discuss in GL. Recurring general concept we have in
Mm-hmm.
GL, that at that time we can discuss. Okay, it is not allowing because if you can see what I did is I have updated the installments. I have installments. I had put split into two installment. One of them I had put on hold. When I try to make in full, it is giving an error message saying that the you must resolve the installment hold before the invoice can be paid, because the complete whatever the invoice amount pay in full it is considering for the 10,000, right? Your doubt is also clear now.